Hello. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending upon what time it is for you guys. I'm Matt Lynett, and today we are going to be talking a bit more about the Iliad. We're going to be talking a bit more about the classics. We're focused on getting a classical education, and the Iliad is a good place to start, especially if we're talking about Western society, Western culture, and especially since the West has been responsible for so much progress. And especially since I'm living in the West, I'm going to show preference for Western society. That's not to say that Eastern society hasn't done a great many things, but I'm going to have to start somewhere. And attaining a Western classical education is, at bare minimum, very, very important to do. And so that's going to be our starting point. So far, we have gone through the first book of the Iliad and through the first 212 lines of the second book of the Iliad. We concluded our last reading when Minerva came to Ulysses. And now we read that she seized whom by her voice Ulysses knew, casting his mantle from him, which his friend Eurybates the Ithacentian caught. He ran, and in his course meeting the son of Atreus Agamemnon from his hand, the everlasting sceptre quick received, which bearing through Achaea's fleet he passed. What king soever, or distinguished Greek, he found approaching to his side in terms. Of gentle sort he stayed him, Sir, he cried. It is unseemly that a man renowned as thou should tremble. Go, resume the seat which thou hast left, and bid the people sit. Thou knowest not clearly yet the monarch's mind. He proves us now, but soon he will chastise. All were not present, few of us have heard his speech this day in council. Oh, beware, lest in resentment of this hasty course irregular he let his anger loose. Dread is the anger of a king, he reigns by Jove's own ordinance, and is dear to Jove. But what plebeian bass soe'er he heard, stretching his throat to swell the general cry, he laid the sceptre smartly on his back. With reprimand severe, fellow, he said, sit still, hear others, thy superiors hear. For who art thou? A dastard and a drone, of none account in council or in arms. By no means may we all alike bear sway. At Ilium, such plurality of kings were evil. One suffices, one to whom the son of politic Saturn hath assigned the sceptre and enforcement of the laws, that he may rule us as a monarch ought. With such authority the troubled host he swayed, they quitting camp and fleet again, rushed back to council. Deafening was the sound, as when a billow of the boisterous deep some broad beach dashes and the ocean roars. So then, the host all seated and the benches filled, Thersites only of loquacious tongue, ungoverned, clamored mutinous, a wretch, of utterance prompt, but in coarse phrase obscene. Deep learned alone with which to slander kings, might he but set the rabble in a roar. He cared not with what jest of all from Greece to Ilium sent his country's chief reproach. Cross-eyed he was, and halting moved on legs, ill-paired his gibbous shoulders o'er his breast, contracted, pinched it to a peak his head, was moulded sharp and sprinkled thin with hair, of starveling length, flimsy and soft as down. Achilles and Ulysses had incurred most his aversion, him or them he never spared, but now in imperial Agamemnon self, in piercing accents stridulous he charged, with foul reproach the Grecians with contempt, listened in indignation while with voice, at highest pitch, he thus the monarch mocked. What wouldest thou now, whereof is thy complaint? Now, Agamemnon, thou hast filled thy tents with treasure, and the Grecians, when they take a city, choose the loveliest girls for thee. Is gold thy wish, more gold, a ransom brought by some chief Trojan for his son's release, whom I or other valiant Greek may bind? Or wouldst thou yet a virgin won by right, another's claim, but make by force thine own? It was not well, great sir, that thou shouldst bring a plague on the Achaeans as of late. But come, my Grecian sisters, soldiers named, unfitly of a sex too soft for war, come, let us homeward, let him here digest what he shall gorge alone, that he may learn if our assistance profit him or not. For when he shamed Achilles, he disgraced a chief far worthier than himself, whose prize he now withholds. But tush, Achilles lacks himself the spirit of a man, no gall hath he within him, or his hand long since had stopped that mouth, that it should scoff no more. Thus, mocking royal Agamemnon spake, Thersites instant starting to his side. Noble Ulysses with indignant brows surveyed him, and him thus reproved severe. So, Thersites is there, bashing Agamemnon. And for some reason, Ulysses still winds up coming to Agamemnon's defense. Still, the whole idea of a king's divine right to lead. Still, this whole idea of this dream coming to Agamemnon was compelling enough to make even the mutiny of Thersites fall essentially on deaf ears. So they set him up as already being kind of a pathetic person. If we go and we look at things from a rhetorical point of view, we have pathos, ethos, and logos. Now, certainly he must have had pathos. Certainly he must have been presenting this material with passion. After all, he was known as being kind of this mutinous dude who was constantly a rabble-rouser, stirring up trouble and the like. And you can't get noticed by being... You're going to have your stuff completely falling on deaf ears if you don't somehow present yourself well. But here, if we go back and we read, ungoverned, clamored, mutinous, a wretch, of utterance prompt but in coarse phrase obscene, deep learned alone with which to slander kings. So basically the only reason that he knew anything was to be a thorn in the side of people that were in charge. Might he but set the rabble in a roar, he cared not with what jest of all from Greece. To Ilium sent his country's chief reproach. And then cross-eyed he was, and halting moved on like so. So he definitely had some sort of deformities. And here Homer uses those deformities as an option, as the actual, a legitimate basis to ridicule Thersites. And that brings a pretty interesting point here. Brings a very interesting point here. Because those are similar reasons that people give to not listen to others today. Why was Thersites not viewed as as having the right to say something. Well, he didn't present himself well. For some reason, people didn't think that he had ethos. Right? He was saying something that was countercultural. He was saying something that was like, well, the Agamemnon doesn't have the right to lead these people. Achilles is way better, and Achilles is a coward too. So what in the world is going on? I mean, Achilles didn't go and defend himself against Agamemnon. He just kind of bent over and took it. He's just there throwing poo, essentially. And whereas that poo may very well have needed to be thrown, if he was actually wise in being mutinous, if being against the status quo was the right thing to do at the time, he still didn't present himself as having enough ethos, or maybe even enough logos, but definitely not enough ethos to be able to have the desired effect. One of the biggest things that you can do in order to have ethos is to conform to a particular stereotype of somebody that is known to be virtuous. For some, that is a squeaky clean stereotype. Clean shaven, well taken care of, a three-piece suit, ready to go and do work. In the West, that's kind of even though it's kind of fallen into disfavor nowadays, this whole three-piece suit thing generally tends to convey a particular attitude, a particular demeanor, and if someone wears it well, that is all fine and good, and they can go and be an influencer. They can go and do work. This person will be able to generally go through business and not get noticed for anything other than his actual performance, unless he goes over the top. So he's fitting a particular stereotype. Well, when we go back here, that thus mocking royal Agamemnon spake, Thersites instant starting to his side, noble Ulysses with indignant brows. Okay, so Ulysses is known to be noble. Ulysses is known to have ethos. That is literally what that word conveys. That word conveys Ulysses has ethos. Everybody knows it, and people listen to him. Just on account of who he is, it's enough to make people listen. Ulysses with indignant brows surveyed him, and thus reproved severe. Thersites, railer, peace, think not thyself, although thus eloquent, alone exempt from obligation not to slander kings. I deem thee most contemptible, the worst of Agamemnon's followers to the war. Presume not then to take the names revered of sovereigns on thy sordid lips to asperse. Their sacred character, you don't have that without some sort of an allusion to the ancient gods being able to somehow appoint certain ones to be leaders, and to appoint certain ones to be followers, and to give some semblance of order to society. This whole divine right to lead then comes back into play. So if you have a divine right to lead, a dream coming from the divine, well then you lead. Kinda dumb, but whatever. Their sacred character, and to appoint the Greeks a time when they shall voyage home. How soon, how late, with what success at last we shall return, we know not, but because Achaea's heroes numerous spoils allot to Agamemnon, leader of the host, thou therefore from thy seat revilest the king. But mark me, if I find thee as even now, raving and foaming at the lips again, may never man behold Ulysses' head on these my shoulders more, and may my son prove the begotten of another sire, if I not strip thee to that hide of thine, as bare as thou wast born, and whip thee hence home to thy galley, snivelling like a boy. He seized, and with his scepter on his back and shoulders smote him, writhing to and fro. He wept profuse, with many a bloody whelk, protuberant beneath the sceptre sprang. All quelled he sat, and from his visage mean, deep sighing, wiped the rims. It was no time for mirth, yet mirth illumined every face, and laughing thus they spake 1,000 acts, illustrious both by well-concerted plans and prudent disposition of the host. Ulysses hath achieved, but this by far transcends his former praise, that he hath quelled such contumelious rhetoric profuse, the valiant talker shall not soon, we judge, take liberties with royal names again. So spake the multitude, then stretching forth thy scepter, city spoiler chief arose. Ulysses, him beside herald in form, appeared Minerva, silent she enjoined, to all that all Achaea's sons might hear, foremost and rearmost, and might weigh his words. He then his counsel prudent thus proposed. So, Ulysses winds up giving Thersites what for, both in word and in action. So, Ulysses winds up getting to do what he wants, due to the fact that people perceive him as noble, due to the fact that people perceive him as strong, due to the fact that he was a good warrior. Being a good warrior was revered in that particular time, and it goes to show that whatever it is, that if you want to have a say, having ethos is necessary. People need to trust you for some reason. And, part of it can be speaking in accordance with the vision that somebody else has given, or part of it could be speaking in accordance with something that everyone else has already agreed to. It's very, very difficult to get up and speak against the status quo. You have to be squeaky clean and spotless so to do, or hold some other means of conveying to other people that you have ethos. If you don't, things will fall flat and you will wind up becoming the whipping boy of someone else who doesn't agree with you and has more clout than you. So bear that in mind and focus on cultivating the image that you need to cultivate. It's a gigantic waste of time, I know, but unfortunately it's necessary. Unfortunately, it's necessary to cultivate that particular kind of an image. And so that's why you wind up having all these industries. That's why you have people making suits today. That's why you have people making things that smell that you spray yourself with. That's why you have people teaching speech. That's why you have people teaching leadership. That's why you have all these industries around these sorts of things. It's because people find it necessary to get a whole bunch of soft skills and soft demeanors and the like in order to get ahead at life. I'm not saying that it's right or wrong. I'm just reporting on the nature of things. And this is one aspect of human nature that hasn't changed in the past many millennia. That's just part of life. And these things of pathos, ethos, and logos have constantly infused communication. And playing the part has been exceedingly important. You can't, unless your part happens to be exactly that, you can't be It's so sad. Ungoverned, clamorous, mutinous, a wretch. You can't do that. You can't have loquacious tongue being your only asset. If you have loquacious tongue being your only asset, people are just going to view you as a big mouth. They're not going to view you as actually having something substantial to say because you're not conveying to them that A, you're passionate about something, B, you are right. And it's definitely not something they want to be listening to. And they won't go and see the logic in your words no matter what, because you haven't gone and conveyed the pathos and the ethos first. And part of ethos is, of course, having your goals and your values lining up with that of the listener. It's not just being a moral person yourself. It is towing the line, so to speak. And it's interesting because then you wind up seeing who winds up getting the platform to speak. Who winds up getting the ability to influence others? Who is it? It's the people that don't stray too far from the status quo, or the people that speak to some primal need that others have that others dare not bring up. For example, there are conservatives that wind up getting the platform a lot because they're espousing ideas that have been espoused for a long time and people can get behind them. Then there are also progressives that wind up getting the platform because they are suggesting, for instance, that the government should be responsible for doing a great many things for people in order to get them what they want. That is a way of convincing people that you have ethos. You can short circuit all of that just by promising people what they want. And especially given that things can in the short term be arranged that way, if you wind up spending other people's money and you wind up reverting the paying back, if you wind up causing the paying back to happen separate of the actual transaction, then you can go and do an awful lot. Right? All these different things make all these different perspectives compelling to different people with different value systems. Now, if you wind up having somebody that's just coming out from left field, it's very, very difficult for that person to make a splash, for that person to have an impact. And I don't mean left field as in being a leftist. I just mean doing something that is radically different than what people are used to, even if it has been proven to work, even if it does have merit. And that's because people feel safe talking about what they feel safe talking about. And so you wind up having to pander to their feelings. You wind up having to pander to this gigantic emotional underpinning that is the foundation for why people actually make their decisions in the first place. People make their decisions by how they feel, and they use this thing to rationalize it later. People make hiring decisions based upon who they want to work with, and then they find ways of rationalizing it later. People make an emotional decision about what kind of a car or a house to purchase, and they rationalize it later. You know, the list of features of a car may actually wind up being a compelling reason for somebody to buy, but the list of features of a car may very well be just those things that you can go and tell your wife to justify the car that you bought. Or the list of features of a house. Like if you just go there and it feels right, then you go and you start thinking, well, what is it that I need to go and say to my spouse in order to make her be okay with this, with going and purchasing this house? And so you then just start trying to list things that the other person might like or want, even though you will have your heart set on it. That's why that saying, "I have my heart set on this," actually works. And that is entirely rooted in pathos. And is entirely based upon an intrinsic value system. It might be even so implicit that you can't articulate it so well. Something could feel right. Something could feel like that's what I want. And so you actually have this whole thing, the pathos and the ethos, being the predominant forces that cause people to come to certain decisions. And that is why I'm belaboring this point so much. I am belaboring this point because I want you, as watchers of this stream or of the video that it winds up or of the video that winds up being produced as a consequence of the stream, I want you to be able to have the tools that it takes to get what you want. That is why we are getting a classical education, and that is why I'm playing the role of Captain Obvious here when we're going and reading the great works. I'm trying to make this stuff useful for you. I'm trying to let you see why these sorts of things have stood the test of time. They've stood the test of time because they're congruent with human nature. That is the same reason that Marxism will constantly creep up, because it's consistent with human desires, but never stand the test of time because it is incongruent with human nature and will never, ever work. Hello, Mr. Matthew Mann. How are you doing? Whether that car is a Mustang, BMW, Saab, Mercedes, Honda, Toyota, etc., you have to make sure it's still in good shape. Make sure you clean it. Yeah. So that's that. Now I'm going to go refill my water cup. I will be right back here in about 20 seconds or so. Seems I need a haircut. Otherwise, I'm not going to be appealing to ethos nearly as much. Indeed, that sort of a thing wound up biting me in the butt during a church board meeting. It was 2 days ago. We had a church board meeting, and I wasn't able to make my points as strongly as I would have liked to, due to the fact that there were a great many miscommunications about the timing and the location and so on, so I wasn't able to be well prepared. I wasn't able to present myself the best that I could. I wound up going in average, relaxing t-shirt and jeans kind of a thing. I wound up not being able to be showered or shaved. I did not have all of the papers printed out that I wanted to have. I was ill-prepared due to a miscommunication about the time and the location of the meeting, and I wasn't able to say what I needed to say in a way that was convincing to others. I failed at the basic part of life. I have to take the lion's share of the blame because I wasn't able, I was just not prepared to do what I needed to do. When I was in undergraduate, I need to take a good share of the blame for why I got poor grades in humanities classes. I wasn't willing to blow smoke up the rear ends of my professors. I spoke the truth, and I was not very eloquent in so doing. I was not very eloquent in speaking the truth. I was not eloquent in speaking against the left. I was not eloquent in speaking against collectivism. I was not eloquent in speaking against progressivism. I was not eloquent. I merely stated things very tersely, very almost in a biting sort of a way, with the attitude of, can't you see this? You blundering, blubbering buffoon. I mean, of course I never said that, but I had that particular attitude. I didn't go and appeal to ethos. I didn't wind up going, oh, well, you would be a, just, oh, I'm this high and mighty moral person. I know what I'm talking about. I have the same, I didn't play up the thing that I have the same goals as you do. I really care. I didn't think that it was necessary to go and say I care, because it's obvious that I wouldn't open my mouth if I didn't care. But for many people it isn't obvious, and you need to go and bang the idea through over and over again with a very, very big, simple stick. You need to have simple language, consistent patterns of speech, and a consistent message that you keep on hammering over and over and over again. Lack of appropriate communication is not an excuse. It's an explanation, but it's not an excuse, because you can learn the communication skills. No matter how stressful it may be, no matter how difficult it may be, no matter how much of an introvert you are, you can teach yourself these things. It winds up being a question of breaking it down into the smallest little steps that you can take at a time. In fact, I would still say I'm pretty much no good at teaching, at speaking, at doing these kinds of things in front of the camera. I still have an adverse reaction to presenting in front of crowds of people online or in person. I think that everyone, to some extent, winds up having this sort of performance anxiety, except for a very small subset of certain extroverts. There are some people that thrive on it. Most people don't. And that means every single time you need to kind of go and put on this particular character that you adopt when you step in front of a crowd, or step in front of a camera, or step in front. You need to be having your A game. Or at bare minimum, you need to have enough stuff prepared that you can go through it with ease. You need to be able to feel comfortable enough with the material, and comfortable enough with the audience, and comfortable enough with all these different other aspects in order to be able to go and say what you need to say to the people you need to say it to. And that means that even after over a decade of presenting stuff to other people, if I'm ill-prepared, I'm still ill-prepared, and I'm going to come across as a buffoon. I don't naturally have it. I don't naturally have this particular skill. It's something I really need to work on. And it's something I consistently need to work on in order to even remain passable. Even to remain passable, I need to consistently work on it. If I want to actually be good, well, that involves a great amount of concerted effort. Now, I think that amount of concerted effort is completely worth it. And I'm here working on my own rhetoric. I'm working especially on my own vocal modulation. Right? I'm normally speaking very monotonously. I'm normally just kind of going like this with very little variance to the tone of my voice. I'm not naturally speaking this way. This is an artifact of my attempting to communicate better. This is an artifact of my attempting to infuse my speech with pathos. It's really difficult for me to have the timbre, the tone, and such of my voice to match up with the emotional implications of what I'm saying, especially since I'm experiencing all the emotions subconsciously and not really being so, if we're going to go Jungian functions, I don't have very much extroverted feeling. Extroverted feeling is very foreign to me. And so I need to go and find some way of using extroverted thinking and introverted feeling together to somehow bring into the light that which is just kind of bottled up in here. And that means that I make mistakes on a regular basis. When I'm talking, what I'm saying is full of mistakes. It's full of difficult things. It's full of times that I just completely screw up or don't even know what's coming out of my mouth because I'm just kind of running on autopilot. It's full of all these different things that could possibly go wrong and do go wrong on a regular basis, and still somehow there winds up being some sort of effective communication. And it can be that way with you too. If you can effectively communicate one idea in one paragraph, and you can stand in front of the mirror, record yourself, what have you, take a video recording of what it is that you say, and work on it. Compare yourself to the people that are actually good. Compare yourself to the people that get things done. Compare yourself to the people that get the results that they want from their public speaking. And do it one sentence at a time, one inflection at a time, one paragraph at a time. Just keep on going and going and going, one little bit by little bit by little bit, and eventually you will be at the place of being able to do this. Now, of course, if I'm already preaching to the choir, if I'm already talking to people that know how to do this, I'm sorry, but I know that the majority of the people watching my stuff are introverts. The majority of the people watching my stuff probably have some of the same problems that I do. And so I'm especially making this material for those of you that might have the logos down, but could be having difficulty in bringing the pathos and the ethos to the forefront. And that can even feel sort of almost like a betrayal of logos. So, well, why in the world would I go and infuse my speech with pathos and infuse my character with ethos and so on? Why would I go and do that if what I have to say will speak for itself? And the answer is because it doesn't speak for itself. Unfortunately, it only speaks for itself for a very small audience. It only speaks for itself for a very small audience. Most people need to get wrapped up into your story. Most people need to get wrapped up into the narrative, and if that narrative is compelling, they will implicitly accept what you say. Now, what does this imply? This implies that whenever you give this narrative, it's going to need to be repeated and repeated and repeated, because this is a narrative that you're spinning that is competing against many other narratives that many other people are spinning. What is most compelling? Well, part of what's most compelling is that which is repeated the most. Some things actually get repeated enough that people consider them true, and it completely bypasses the ability to, or the desire to think critically about something. And the thing is, you can go and say, look, I want you to think critically about what I'm saying. I don't want you to just take it. I want you to actually come to the conclusion yourself. And if you don't come to the conclusion yourself, well, there always is the possibility that I'm wrong. But I'm not going to go and infuse my speech with pathos and ethos just to manipulate you. But I am going to infuse my speech with pathos and ethos in order to present the material that I have in the best possible light. Because many people are presenting crap in the best possible light. Many people are presenting wrong things in the best possible light. And I want my ideas to at least be on par with the crap that people implicitly swallow. If you wind up having somebody implicitly swallowing crap, the least you can do is make your own ideas palatable to the point where the people will swallow them and cogitate about them. And then, if they've already been listening to the crap, then you wind up having this internal this internal dialectic going on inside of the other person. We wind up having this dialogue. You wind up having this cognitive dissonance that you've gone and influenced, but because you've done it in a persuasive way, because you've done it in a way infused with pathos and ethos, people won't immediately necessarily disregard what you said. People will then be able to have a more positive view of what you're saying and be able to then not let who you are get in the way of the idea that you're conveying, and they'll be able to come to their own conclusions and have that internal dialogue between the different ideas that they hear pouring into their head, and ultimately come to some semblance of conclusion. Yeah, I could really be choking back bile just to admit that, but the fact of the matter is, you can either make peace with the reality, or you can fight it. And if you're fighting that particular reality, well, your entire life's going to be an uphill battle. I mean, it's going to be an uphill battle no matter what. We all have the world on a string, and the question winds up being ultimately who is pulling the hardest and with the most skill. And who is aligning the pull of their strings with people that are sufficiently similar to be able to achieve the results they want to achieve in the world. Ultimately, that involves unabashed proclamation of a certain system of values and working with other people to see or to demonstrate to them how they can get what they want by listening to what you have to say. That is incredibly, incredibly important. And if you have that skill down, you've got it made. Mr. Man has a lot to say here. And so does... I'm only jesting. That's too long. I was waiting forever. What do I think about Harley Davidsons? I think that they're cool. If only progressive actually meant what the name suggested. Yeah. I mean, I suppose you can progress along a wrong kind of a path. Go to the backyard and cut off a bamboo shoot. Ah, sounds like fun. Alright, here we go. Yeah, politicians, business people, and others are usually great manipulators and deceivers and are great at lying and tricking. Heck, the media and industry often, not always, does this by itself. ENTJ Ferrari, ENTP Dune Buggy, INTJ Motorcycle, INTP Moped. What in the world are you talking about, Mr. Beers? I have an idea. But, like, what's the point? What's the point? This is like raw, unfiltered any. Oh boy. So Mr. Beers was just having a stream. Yeah, Harleys are okay. Very well marketed. They have a particular brand. They have a particular feel. Well, I was answering Mr. Mann's question about what do I think about motorcycles like the Harley Davidsons. I'm okay with them. I like them. I think that they have a really good feel to them. And the noise, the two-cylinder V, I mean, that particular angle generates a wonderful noise. FI can appreciate that. SE can appreciate that. Would I prefer them over BMW and Honda? It depends on the purpose. It depends on the purpose. Would I prefer an Ariel Atom over Bugatti Veyron? If that's what I want to, if that's the kind of driving I want to do, yeah. If I want to have a crazy expensive car, then no, I'll prefer the Bugatti Veyron. So you need to specify what the purpose is, otherwise I wouldn't be able to give you a straight answer on the matter. I mean, what kind of a car would I like to have? Would I like a Porsche Panamera? Sure. Would I like a Toyota Corolla? Absolutely. There would be two for. Oh, you're talking the newest Bugatti? Yeah, doesn't that have a top speed of nearly 270 now, or over 270? Either way, it burns a great deal of it burns a great deal of gasoline. I don't know if that would be necessarily my thing. I would rather have, say, a Pagani or something like that, which of course still does burn a lot of gasoline, but I'd rather buy a I'd rather build a car from scratch. There are certain elements that I like. The element of customizability, the element of being able to go and tear my own car apart and yeah, that would be cool. I would like the customizability. I would like being able to tear the car apart myself and doing little things to increase its performance or to make it be what I want it to be. Those are sorts of things that I value. Those are sorts of things that I like. And, well, I can't go and say, yeah, but I'm not talking about German and Japanese vehicles, Mr. Mann. That's the thing. Is there are many different things that are good in so many different ways that you ultimately just have to pick what you want. I mean, there's nothing intrinsically moral about buying one car over another. Now, the reasoning behind it, yeah, there might be something intrinsically moral about that, but if you can afford a Bugatti, if you can afford a Koenigsegg, if you can afford a Lamborghini, then get one. Just be prepared to live with the consequences of buying it. Be prepared to pay the costs of upkeep and the social costs. just know what it is that you want and make the appropriate decisions. Know what it is you want. Yeah, Germans make awesome vehicles. I especially like the diesel Mercedes. Those are nice. The diesel Mercedes are great. I mean, if I didn't have to worry about the cost of upkeep, the cost of insurance, the cost of anything like that, I would probably go and drive, say, a Porsche 911 GT2 as my personal car, and a Porsche Panamera as a family car, and then I don't know. I don't know, but I've kind of had this thing for Porsche since I've been little. I thought they were cool, so I might get one if I could. But does that mean that I don't appreciate? I really appreciate the way, say, a BMW drives. I appreciate the way a Mercedes feels. I appreciate the way a Toyota is economical. I appreciate all these other different things, and ultimately, if I wind up purchasing a car, it's going to be on the basis of whatever it is that I want or need at the moment. You wind up having the logos providing the information for the pathos and the ethos to make the decisions. Or rather, the pathos and the pathos giving you the kind of basic drive to go and get a particular car, or to go and follow a particular idea or what have you. The ethos to kind of give you the moral framework, okay, well, what is it I want out of life? Am I going to risk my friendships by buying this fancy car? Am I going to risk my children's upbringing? There may be this thing that I won't buy a fancy car until my kids move out at all. Ah, yeah, you can prefer Coke or Pepsi. Yeah, you could do that. Yeah. Yeah. But then there are some things that, like Pepsi and Coke both serve the purpose of quenching your thirst. And I prefer Coke to Pepsi. But they're there for fulfilling a particular gustatory desire. Right? And then you wind up having cars. I mean, those, yeah, ultimately fulfill the need of moving from A to B. But there's so much more. The supplies, for instance. Supply speed, carrying heavy loads, and other uses. And a lot of it falls under other uses. BMWs are fun to drive. Though, I mean, they're marketed as such, and they are such. Porsches are fun to drive. Mercedes are fun to drive, but in different ways. Like a Porsche is those things drive like they're on rails. BMWs, those things, you feel the road. You have the feeling of a good driving experience, and you actually sacrifice a lot of the. You can sacrifice a lot of the smoothness that you might get with like the old Cadillac that you can drive with a single finger, for the feeling of being kind of at one with the road. Then there are luxury cars that happen to be very powerful, but that aren't exactly known for being powerful because they're known for being luxurious. F-150. Dodges and Rams are the cars people usually have access for storage and tools. F-150 is the most popular car amongst business people. Rolls-Royce, never driven one. Bentleys are nice. Those are fun. Yeah, they're all sorts of really cool cars. None of which I've ever owned. I've owned 2 Ford Escorts and a Mercury Tracer, which is essentially a Ford Escort. and a Ford F-150. So yeah, I've owned 4 cars. My wife has had a Renault Clio, 1998, I think. But yeah, Ford F-150 is one of those kinds of cars that anybody can get. So is a Jeep Wrangler. Like, you wind up having billionaires with Jeep Wranglers, and you wind up having people that can barely make it from paycheck to paycheck with Jeep Wranglers. Same with the Fords. They have a particular purpose in mind that transcends social class. You know, I will probably wind up getting a Jeep at some point. If I'm rich or wealthy, I can have all sorts of options at my disposal, and I can choose not to take these options. As things currently stand, I'm not wealthy enough to be able to afford a lot of things, because my criterion for buying things is that I need to be able to passively be able to afford to have them. I'm not buying a Hummer. I'd rather have a Jeep Wrangler or something of that nature. I'd rather have a Wrangler. I would, or a Liberty. That's the kind of a, you could go and turn a Wrangler into a family car. Hummers are fun, but not fuel efficient. I mean, Wranglers aren't either particularly fuel efficient, but they're way more useful. So, so you wind up having all these different choices. I seem like I have plenty and I'm upper middle class. Wow. Well, in that case, see, I actually don't know where that line is, but I can tell you based on my annual income, no. I just happen to know how to live well with what I have. I happen to know how to live well with what I have. And based off of where I'm currently living with my family, our place is something that many people would say that the size of our family is too big for. That we've somehow outgrown our place. And we have 1 bedroom, 1 kitchen, 1 bathroom, and a shower room. It's split on 2 levels. Yeah, I'm definitely not upper middle class. I'm not upper middle class. I'm not going to be upper middle class until. Yeah. And I'm living beneath my means too, because, well, ultimately, at least for me, life is an optimization problem. It's like, how can you get the most for the least? And then ultimately, what is it that you want? So I'm going to be living where I'm living and paying rent for as long as I can, and for as long as it makes sense. If I wind up having some rental properties or some dividends, ultimately being able to pay for a house of my own, then I'm going to get one, and just pay cash for it, be done, and then and so on. Like I have this different set of values than many people do, and that means it's going to take me a while longer, probably until I'm in my mid-30s, to be able to live the kind of life I want to live. I'm not saying that anybody else needs to do that, but I am advocating for focusing on producing as much as you absolutely can and living on as absolutely little as you can. Especially like in your first years of marriage, or in your first years of being in business, your first years of having a job. living on nothing and investing like crazy. And then also cultivating the ability to talk with other people and invest other people's money, because if you wind up getting together with some friends, a lower class are in the lowest of circumstances and situations. Well, here, well, I'll tell you what. Here's something to consider. If you go to the home of certain poor people, and of certain middle class people, and of certain rich people, you'll obviously find exceptions to this. But a lot of what puts somebody into a particular bracket and keeps them there is an attitude thing. Like, you can wind up, for instance, being poor and having things be in a very poor state. Things being in a very horrible state because you don't care anymore. You can be like, well, I'm just renting this place. I don't need to take care of it. I'm just renting this place. I don't need to go and do all these things. My landlord will make sure that all this stuff is taken care of. All I need to do is not get evicted, period. Whereas you can have the attitude that, okay, I'm going to live in an even smaller, even worse place, but I am going to spend the difference in the rent that I would be spending for a little bit nicer place to keep up my place, to make it, to keep it clean, to keep it functional, to make sure everything is working the way it needs to work. You can take something small and work with it and keep it up and make it good. You can, and I know you're not even going to necessarily keep the value yourself because you're renting the place, which is, one of the reasons that home ownership is kind of compelling. But even if you are renting and you're taking care of the place for your landlord, then you're establishing a particular set of habits of caring for that which belongs to you. So, but I noticed that lots of people who are poor don't do that. Lots of people who are poor have a defeatist attitude, and this causes a nasty downward spiral of remaining poor. Whereas going and taking a little bit of time every day in order to improve one's circumstances, going and taking a little bit of time every day to go and make my home more livable, make my home more organized, make my life more livable, make my life more organized, start a side hustle, do all these different things. If you can just ever so slightly start the spiral going in the upward direction, things will tend to go better as a trend, and then that averaged over the course of a lifetime will allow you to have upward social mobility. So I can live off of next to nothing here. I can live off of next to nothing, investing as absolutely much as I can. Alright, well, if you can still go bankrupt if they're irresponsible, yeah, well, you can wind up also paying for things with other people's money. You can take loans, you can run businesses on behalf of other people, demand a bigger cut because you're the one running things. So there are all sorts of different ways of leveraging other people's money. And then the question winds up being mostly, okay, how do you value a business? Which is an entirely different question. It's an entirely different question. How do you value a business? But my basic principle is my basic principle is you need to be able, or at least I need to be, in order to be able to say I can afford something, I need to be able to have investments pay for it. And then once you get to that point of being financially independent, of having your investments paying for your lifestyle, then you can start doing a whole lot more. But I don't want to go and jump into that whole wage slavery thing. I don't want to go and have it be such that if something happens, I'm screwed. No. I have nearly half a year's worth of living expenses just saved up, stashed away. And it's an awful lot easier to have your half a year's of living expenses stashed away if your living expenses are less. Now granted, if you want to have higher living expenses, well then you better figure out how to pay for them. But then determining what it is you can and cannot afford is a very... It's a calculation that people could stand to be a little more conservative with. And if they deferred gratification just a little bit, they would be able to have a much higher quality of life later. I am firmly convinced that if you go and shack up with a whole bunch of friends and either go to college or start work, and because you have so many roommates, you basically cut down your living expenses to next to nothing. You go and you're smart about it. If you go and you work together to buy food in bulk, to eat food in bulk, to organize your life in such a way that you can go and put a bunch of money away and invest it, 5 years out from turning 18, you can be financially independent if you want. You can pull that off. Now, I didn't. I'm not financially independent. And what in the world is this whole secret stash of safes and other places to put your money? Well, money is only money, right? You can have things that store value, sure, but you want to have assets. You want to have assets. I mean, 6 months of living expenses is, I mean, it's not a big amount, but it's not a small amount either. You have some of it in the bank. You have some of it. You have some of it at home. You have some of it in many different places. But ultimately, you just take a few precautions, and it'll be fine. It'll be fine. But having half a year's worth of living expenses certainly goes and frees you up to be able to try different things. It frees you up to being able to try a business idea that may fail. It frees you up to be able to make 6 months worth of mistakes before having to go back and do whatever it was you were doing beforehand. It's kind of nice. But tell me how many people do that. I'll tell you what, we've been going for a little over an hour, and my voice is about shot. We're having a little bit of a cold going around my family, and I've been having some really, really nasty drainage. So I'm sorry, but I can't really go on for much longer with the talking and all the rest of it. I would agree that it's nice to have a trusted circle of friends. If you can have one, that's it's very nice. Ultimately, having people with a congruent set of with a set of values that's congruent to yours is very, very important. But yeah, thank you guys for tuning in, and I look forward then to seeing you again on Sunday at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. Sunday at 2 p.m. Eastern Time, 9 p.m. my time. We're going to talk a little bit more about the Iliad and some other topics, maybe a little bit about current events. Thank you, Matthew. Thank you, everyone. Talk to you later. Bye.